Are we there yet? I think so. It says I'm live. What's up, guys? How are you? Thank you for clicking on the video. So yes, I'm back. I've made it again. It is it's 4:15 today. Changed it up a little bit. So interesting show we have today. I actually really wanted to go a little bit further, trying to continually evolve this show and evolve this content. If you haven't never joined me before, my name is Damian Knight. I'll get into that a little bit, but let me give you a preview first and foremost of what we're going to get into today. So interestingly, as the current situation continues, yes, we are going to door-to-door car sales. We're going to get into that, talk about some details and some of the best deals that you can get out there anywhere. It's a buyer's market. I mean, can't lie. This guy will come to your house. He will probably, pick up your car, take it to service, sell you one. So, I mean, we got options, folks. We're going to talk about the C8 Corvette. Oh, man, they've had a tough year. Not only did they endure a 40-day strike back in the end of 2019, which delayed the car, now they've actually stopped taking orders altogether. We're going to talk about that briefly, and then we're going to get into $1.8 million Porsches, of course. I mean, lots of people want them. So, the Restomod world is crazy. 2020 is coming in with a bang, folks. That's what we're going to talk about here today on Night Drive Live. Forced induction fabricator, engine management tuner, shop owner. I wanted to start a daily show about everything automotive. You're watching Night Drive Live. Alrighty, folks. So here we are again. So let's just get a few things out of the way. My name's Damian Knight. I decided to do a live show about 2 weeks ago. I have a lot of other content on my channel. Do things with C5, C6 Corvettes. Do some off-road stuff. I really put a lot of energy into those videos, so you might want to check one of those out. I fly drones, and I really aim for production quality. Actually did a lot of video stuff years back, and as part of various businesses and things like that. So I really enjoy video, and this is just a natural thing to evolve. And so I decided, well, hey, I like talking about cars. Maybe other people will be into it too. So maybe they'd be down with a live show. So here we are. We have this platform. Obviously, things are ever evolving online, and I just want to clear things up that this is yellow. But because of the green screen effects and all that stuff, obviously it has to, I have to change colors and whatnot. So I'm actually of Middle Eastern descent. That may surprise you as well. Whether or not I'm like just a torso, I'm not going to let you know. I feel like I've already told you too much. So anyway, we're going to get into a couple things, but feel free to leave a comment. We are live. I will interact with you guys, and I see a few of you from that have been here before. Cole, Joe, Android, what's up, guys? How are you? Thank you for coming back. So we're continuing. We're chugging along, guys, and enjoying our time inside, taking our mini vacays or whatever it is. And got Lace there. How are you? So, yeah, we're going to kind of start off with the fact that obviously it is a buyer's market. And if you're in the mode to buy a vehicle, I mean, now is probably the time if you can endure it, if you're not too scared of getting into the dealerships and whatnot. They are empty, but we're going to talk about solutions for that because these dealers are definitely hyped up. But GM's offering 0% financing for 7 years. That's kind of been making the news. And so I figured, maybe I should check around and see, like, what's the best deals out there? What are the deals that you can definitely get that are, maybe a little bit ahead of the other, anything else out there. But obviously it comes down to the fact, can you buy a car? So, this kind of came up and popped up as to where this Albuquerque dealership, they have decided that they are just going to send guys out on foot. And do door-to-door sales. I don't know if that's literal, because I imagine some people are probably going to be going like panic mode, but obviously the service department, they will concierge pick up your car. So anybody out there that has a new car, maybe that's something your dealer or your local dealers are entertaining. So it was just kind of interesting. I imagine a lot of these dealerships are truly facing super chat. Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate that, man. Toilet paper money, but it ain't no good if I can't find any. And we are looking. So luckily we went shopping before this all started, and we got a little lead time here. Our supply chain internally is good for now, but I appreciate the super chat, my man. That's a big deal because coincidentally, well, I'll talk about it later. Let's get through the news. So, obviously guys are going door to door. I imagine car salesmen are probably looking for work or thinking about it. So we're going to have to see what happens. You know, as it was in the LA Times, they said that even in LA and even in California, they're taking every effort to clean these cars and try to kind of meet some of these standards. But obviously, I think that they know that what's around the corner here is probably not good. But in this particular circumstance, somebody in Seattle said they wanted to buy a Sedona minivan. They had great deals out there. The salesperson sent a staffer to their home with paperwork, closed the sale. Loaded the of a loaded $40,000 vehicle and off it went. So it is a buyer's market if you're out there. So that's what I decided. I'm going to go ahead and try and see if I can, let me see what that's not going to be a good screen. I wanted to see what the best screen for this is. Interestingly, the Buick Envision, they're really overstocked on the lots, and this is the only car I think currently that's built in China and from an American automaker and sold here. So 0% finance, 72 months, typical GM deal, but they're big cashback deals, and this expires. A lot of this stuff expires at the end of March, so $5,000 cash back, and this looks to be pretty much across the United States. Escalade, which is a big money maker for GM, lots of margin on an Escalade. No surprise, they're chopping off $9-10 grand, other kind of incentives, but you're still talking about an $80,000 vehicle, something like that. Chevy Bolt's never really sold well, and so no surprise there. $8,500 cash back. Spreading out these loans, 72 months, 84 months. I mean, on $20,000-$30,000 cars, but great opportunity, like I said. And we're going to go through these quick. So if you're still with me, you're saying get to the Restomod stuff, get to something else. Trust me, we're going. Where's the shirt from, Joe? I'm going to tell you about that in a second. That's kind of an interesting story. 2020 Dodge Challenger, $79.70 cash back. Challengers, they're selling. That is an amazing deal. That chassis, the Challenger, was developed by Daimler Chrysler when they were in the merger. So before Fiat and everything came along, that was a lot of Mercedes components and things in that chassis. That chassis was developed in the mid 2000s. It amazes me that they have continued to sell, and I mean sell well. They just stick different motors in them, you know what I mean? And people just can't stop buying them. It's amazing. Very little redesign. Obviously, they threw some flares on one. They threw a motor in another, but I mean, it's just amazing how they continue. One of their definite most successful platforms. 2020 Ford Explorer, lots of deals, obviously, and this 0% stuff. This is for prime. I mean, this is not going to be like if you're like, man, I got a 580, but I can use a ride. You know what I mean? You're not going to get zero financing. So, but lots of cashback deals, 5250 in the Northeast and Mid Atlantic. Stuff. So there's definitely opportunities out there. 2020 GMC Sierra, same deal, 6500. Kia Forte. So I mean, you can see Nissan, Ram 1500, Rams. They sell Rams like crazy. It seems like FCA has been just running deals on Rams for years. I got a couple friends that have Rams, and it's endless. But interestingly, Subaru popped up. Subaru's a little tougher, usually to get financing and usually to just get approved with Subaru financing themselves. A little bit tougher. They have some pretty stringent requirements, and they don't usually run deals. So that's kind of an interesting one, but it's it's the Ascent. So expires on the 31st if you're into that, and Toyota Tundras. So that's a big one. Toyota Tundras, lots of fans out there. Toyotas, not often that they do big deals because typically people like those vehicles. So that's interesting. On the shirt, let me get to the shirt now. And since we're in the interim, we're going to move over to Corvette, and so I figured I will tell you about the shirt. So I got this shirt. I'm wanting to say in 2011. It's actually in very good condition. It looks faded, but basically. I got the shirt at in Mid-Ohio racetrack in 2011, if I recall. It was an American Le Mans Series race, the C6R. So this is a C6 edition shirt. If I can get back, it's a full-on. Got the Jake, the old school Jake logo on it. It's a cool shirt. It's actually a really nice construction and everything. It's held up very well. So I usually wear it on race day, but it's a sad time for Corvette. I'm mourning a little bit because we're missing races. Obviously, this was Sebring month. Sebring has been moved to November, and now we have Long Beach coming. And Long Beach, from what I understand, they are rescheduling it or attempting to. So I've never been to Long Beach. If you've never been to the races with the C8Rs and C7Rs and all that stuff, absolutely go there in person. If you look on my channel, and I'll actually put a link up here. I've never done this before with this setup. I'm going to put the little banner out after this uploads. I'll show you a link. You could check out when we went to Laguna Seca, Lace and I, for the last year, the C7R last year. And awesome deal. We camped. Definitely go to the races if you get a chance once this all returns to normal, hopefully. But that pretty much takes me over to C8 here. And so orders have been halted. There's definitely guys on the forums. Let me adjust this. There's guys on the forums, obviously, that, you know, were highly anticipating the 2020 C8 Corvette and the release of it. Lo and behold, that 40-day strike that the UAW kind of got GM with delayed production. They almost didn't know about the 2020 as it was. And so no sooner do these cars start getting produced, there's a lot of guys in limbo that have orders, and now, you know, everything's going to shut down. So what it seems like is 2020 year for Corvette is going to be potentially a short production year. So they're saying a lot of these orders are going to roll over into 2021 models. I've seen people on the forums pulling their orders, which, you know, is a shame, because you know that you know, they're angry about it. But I mean, inevitably, you know, it's not GM's fault. It's not something internal to them. I mean, this is, what do you do about it? You know, but guys are like, oh, I'm going to buy a Camaro, buy what's on the lot. So they'll be back. They'll be back. You know, throwing fits on the forums doesn't get your case forward. So yeah, C8s look like, they say, due to high demand, they are halting it altogether because they can't build enough. And there was words that they had limited the orders to begin with, but certainly in this case, I think from what they can build from now until the end of the production year, they're pretty much maxed out. So, I mean, they should hopefully still do well, and obviously we hope that doesn't delay the more important Z06, things like that. So, you know, interesting evolution of how this is all taking place. I assume that, you know, as long as we can get past it, you know, it should be okay. I think they closed the plants until the 31st for now. So short time frame. We'll see what happens. Joe, man, oh boy, they got you. They got Joe and Cole. I don't know what y'all put on there. The system's automatic, so if anybody posts, you know, into that system, who knows what it's shielding these days. I have no idea. It's not something I am a part of. So yeah, so I'm still working on my screens, guys. Still trying to get everything together. You see this detail here. Where's my camera? You see this detail right here. I'm trying to figure out a list method so that when people come on, they can see what the subject matter is going to be. Going from the best car deals to the C8 Corvette, now we're going to go into Restomod Mania. I would like to have a scrolling list, and that's my overall goal. But, you know, obviously I'm trying to continually develop all this and keep it going. So that's what we're going to get into now, is Restomods. And I mean, who doesn't like Restomods? You know, I thought about, you know, I have SEMA footage from every year, and, you know, I'm always looking at how to leverage that and come up with ways to get into that footage, because I've made videos on my channel, SEMA, every year. I kind of try to do a well-packaged video. You can see all the different types of cars and things like that. But man, I'm looking through footage, I'm like, I have so much good stuff. But essentially, I'm going to talk about first the Porsche hype, and I think that's where the Restomod, I mean, Restomods are not new, but we've seen, since the economy has kind of bounced back from the recession of 2008, 2009, you know, and Porsche values have increased dramatically. I sold a Porsche 993 yellow C4S with, I can't remember the mileage, 60,000 miles maybe, for like $28,000 in 2011. That car is like 60-70 grand now. So, you know, sold a Lamborghini Diablo on behalf of someone for $68,000 in that same year. The car's like worth $200 now. So it was a crazy time, and you know, there's lots to be learned from that period, probably till now. But you know, the Porsche hype has just come on full bore as the economy recovered. Porsches just, people love them, and they appreciated a lot of the cars that were considered the old midlife crisis car. Was buying a Porsche, you know, an 80s air-cooled. People were just, you know, they were like, they wanted them. And so, you know, I started looking at a lot of, there's so many Porsche Restomod companies that have come out, and I'm going to show you a lot of photos here of just some amazing different types of vehicles and things like that. But let me reorganize just for a second here, and that way I can kind of talk to you a little bit easier. Hold on 1 second. And so we're going to start with, most of y'all will probably be familiar with the Porsche 959 or not. But that's what this car was homologated, I believe, for Group B racing, if I remember correctly. And so it's your typical 911, but they had actually put an 8-cylinder in it, and they use it a lot in rally and things like that. And not, as if Porsche didn't already have enough rear weight bias back then, they hung a little extra off the back end. But that car was not intended to come here. So there was a man named Bruce, I can't pronounce his last name, Canepa, something like that, and he was a former race car driver and Restomod master, and he started to bring those cars into this country. So he actually started doing a Restomod kind of deal with these cars. 763 horsepower engine he's throwing in these, and that's not what we want to get to yet, but this kind of shows the kind of hype train that's behind Porsche. People want Porsches, they want modified versions of Porsches, and the money is there, and it's really led to this snowball effect. And so what we're going to talk about here is what vehicles do you think will be impacted by this continual uptrend of people wanting to do resto mods and really complete things. And if you're not a real big Porsche fan or not into it, you're going to be surprised by some of this stuff that I'm going to show you here ahead. But this is from Emory. And that's Emory to some Emorys that may be viewing, because I have a guy out there with that particular last name, but this is Emory. This is the RS. This car was at SEMA in 2018, and it's a very interesting. This guy built 356s quite a bit, kind of just continually modifies these things to very radical forms, but they're big money, and that's for sure. This is kind of the car here. Tell me what you guys think of that. Obviously, it's a very small car, very compact, very light, and he has gone very radical with these body-shaped panels and things like that. So it's our hand-shaped body panels. I don't know, did I say body-shaped? Body-shaped by hand. But, interestingly, when we were at SEMA, I think that... I think Lace and I, we were kind of walking the halls, and we do this every year. So if you're a fan of the channel, if you're a subscriber, just know that, every SEMA and things like that, I'm up in there. And this year I have some plans to kind of do some things differently. But let me show you, we were actually by this car, and we got to see it up close, some of the handwork, and he left everything in raw metal. So I mean, he was there to show you that all the work was done. It's a lot of craftsmanship goes into it, a lot of time and labor, obviously, and so that's what you're paying for when you pay $300, $400, and obviously we're going to get up into the millions here for some of these vehicles. I mean, you're paying not just for people are like, oh, Porsche, I could buy one for $50. You're paying for the expertise, the unique nature and things, and obviously this is a very small customer base, but yeah, I was pretty intrigued by the car. Love turbo setups, obviously. If anything gets me, it's going to SEMA and looking at turbo setups, because that's what I built. A lot of forced induction systems, I fabricated all that stuff, and and so I love looking at symmetry. I just like looking at how I would construct it. Every time I built a one-off turbo system, I tried to do it differently. That was always an objective of mine. I wanted to just change it, and it was like a creative art form, and you'll see that a lot with people that build cars like this. They're painters, they're artists that are applying their art into the form of a vehicle, and obviously people will pay millions of dollars for a painting on the wall. So in some ways, some people think it's crazy to pay that much for a car, but you're really paying for the artist's creation and the ability to drive it around. And the beauty of it is theoretically you may pay $500,000, $800,000, $900,000 for these cars, but theoretically that value is held in place. And if it's some of these makers with a name behind them, that will be the case. But let me check out your comments here. What cars from our generations, 90s to early 2000s, you see going up in price crazy? Wish I still had my 06 Evo 9. You see, great car. Yeah, that's a conversation. We'll get into that in a little bit. I'm gonna bust through these Porsches, and that's kind of setting the stage. We're gonna kind of get into some of these other resto mods that I've found, and I do have some theories, and that's part of this. So I'm gonna get into that, but. Basically, I tried to look at trends from a lot of different angles, and obviously going to SEMA, I've had a lot of different ways that I've always done that, and that's typically reading around forums. You could see momentum and energy coming, and there's just so many things that impact value long term, and that's something I I've ranted about at times, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But definitely, you know, tons of work into that car. Pretty cool. Typically, anything I kind of talk about, I have video of somewhere in my computer. So just let that be known. But let me switch to a different view here. Maybe we can get the chat a little better. What am I? Okay, that's the video. We don't want that. So yeah, check this thing out. This is Gunther Werks. This is and as you can see, that is all carbon. I mean, that's the extent that we are at. Just think if somebody did an all carbon anything. I mean, the development costs alone are incredible. But the big deal with Gunther Werks is that they did this widened front track on these cars. They went for a better weight distribution, and they used a 993 chassis, which was the most developed air-cooled chassis for these cars. But yeah, Cole, I guess you're probably referring to the Emory, digging it in Radical. Definitely. Would love to drive one of those cars, to be honest with you. I mean, because super light turbos, rear weight bias like that's got to be interesting. But I think that's, you know, the beauty of Porsche, as much as I don't want to say I don't like Porsche. I do. I appreciate Porsche, but because there's just so much hype behind it. But I mean, inevitably, you know, 993s, for example, when I first drove a 993, I didn't have Porsche hype on the brain. You know, I had posters of Porsches when I was young, and I appreciated Porsches. I had 959 posters and a 930 slant nose poster, I remember. But when I first drove the car, you know, it didn't stun me. It didn't blow me away. I appreciated a few details of it, which is great front visibility, great turn-in sharpness. But it was frankly one of the hardest cars to heel toe I'd ever driven, and I'll probably compare that to a Toyota Tundra. Or Tacoma. I could heel toe that easier. So, you know, there were some quirks that I thought, you know, and the air cooled motors really weren't very torquey, at least that particular one that I drove, but very sharp in the front end. And I could see why people want to develop these chassis further, because some of the interior was very basic. You hear about C5 Corvettes and certain things getting criticized for their real basic interiors in the 90s and 2000s, but you know, frankly, Porsches weren't that much different. I mean, if you look at a lot of German cars, I mean, they had more switches. They sometimes had a little bit more going on, but it's not that the quality was just this mind-blowing difference, at least in my opinion. And the Porsche was super basic. So you could see the desire of people to try and take that chassis and kind of update it. And so I think this is a recipe for a lot of different vehicles, but this Gunther Werks car is pretty sick, and obviously all carbon. They modded the front track. I really think the balance visually is a lot nicer, and I mean, I would love to see. I've seen a Gunther Werks in person. It was painted red though. I would freaking love to see one of these. Love the wheels on this thing. I mean, this car is serious. I would definitely like to see one of those in person. Obviously, you have RUF. They're off of the Autobahn in Germany. The interesting part of RUF is that's their Porsche. I mean, people say, hey, you know, RUF looks like a Porsche. Is it really that different? I mean, in the case of that particular model that they build, which is, I think it's called the RUF SCR, this was their most aggressive build, 2,755 pounds. They did a carbon monocoque chassis, tube chassis, and you know, obviously for your mounting points and whatnot, but carbon tub, cantilever suspension, front and rear. I mean, there's really nothing to this car. They put a 4-liter naturally aspirated Porsche Boxter engine in it, 500 horsepower, 346 foot-pounds. So pretty serious. But you know, obviously it comes down to this. And I mean, if you know or follow the market, this is the Singer Porsche, and Singer, you know, really, you know, it changed the game, because Singer, they wanted to develop, you know, carbon parts, carbon bodies. They replace all the rear quarters, everything with carbon. They do everything to the end. Every switch, every stitch of thread, they go all in on these cars. And so when the company debuted, the idea was it was $400,000, and it wasn't long after the downturn that this company came out. So the economy was still rising, and so they did $400,000 for one of these cars. Well, you know, it has obviously continued, and it got to the point that they did this particular car, and this is their most radical build yet. And they had a name for it. It's called the Dynamics and Lightweight Study, the DLS. And the idea behind this was to just go as all in. And so they have people involved. Chris Harris of Top Gear now. I think one of the Frankidis, one of the race car drivers. But this car is just developed like to the limits, and it is very impressive, but it is $1.8 million. And you know, there's clearly customers out there that will pay that theoretically, but I'm going to show you this 3D rendering of this configuration. But you can see these windows, these become air inlets, and you can see this kind of carbon intake system here. See, this is the, I mean, it's amazing. I would love to see one of these in person. I haven't, but the interior, you can see they focus literally on every single detail. But this is actually the 3D rendering that they did. They work with Cosworth, if I recall, on the engine. But Inconel, I believe Inconel exhaust, which was used in F1 and things for heat resistance and lightweight. But intake system up above using those rear windows. Pretty impressive for sure. This is a different variant of that. It shows you kind of the exhaust routing, but company is serious. And so here's the interior, obviously very impressive. I mean, $1.8 million you're getting, you know, but that's Bugatti Chiron money. You know, that's Koenigsegg Igera money. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I think the big issue with these cars is everything is just made to the extent that it's so bespoke and one-off. I just wonder, you know, if somebody hits it, you know, you get in any kind of incident. I mean, there's nobody's going to fix it. It's going to have to go back to Singer clearly. But this is just, I mean, the car is so freaking impressive. I don't know if you guys have seen Singers before, but just totally ridiculous in terms of quality. But, you know, again, $1.8 million, and that's going to be that. So, yeah, so the deal is, I mean, Restomod's kind of opens up the you know, the idea that is what other chassis would stand this type of treatment. What other chassis has a following or an enthusiast base that is willing to pay a premium? And obviously we know that even just looking at Porsche as a brand, where GT3 RSs and GT2 RSs are up there in terms of cost. I mean, people will pay for the brand. And then you have the purists, the real diehards that, you know, have made their money in business and said, hey, I just want something next level. You know, what other brand has that type of following, I think, is the real question, especially in terms of Porsche's kind of, I've always looked at Corvette as the one that punches above the belt to kind of get up into the Porsche for lower end Ferrari type of territory. But then Porsche, you'll notice they kind of knock into that higher end of Lamborghini, McLaren, and so Porsche in a way kind of does to the big dogs what Corvette kind of does to that, you know, that line above just normal everyday sports car into exotic territory. So let me show you this. And so, you know, here's one which is a big one, and you know, Japanese is going to come into this. Now, cost-wise, I don't know how far you can get somebody to spend on a 240Z, but these were great for the 70s. Consider the fact that everything in the 70s in America was just boat length, massive, underpowered, 180 horsepower. You know, the Cadillac, I think, had a 500 cubic inch engine that I think made like, you know, 180 horsepower. Obviously, they made some torque, but 240Z, as you can see here, you know, definitely a candidate. I mean, and 240s, you know, the design was a lot of different. There was a lot of different things put into the design of 240. E-Type Jaguar, I know they talked about as an influence. I think 250 Ferrari GT, something like that, if I recall. And so, you know, this company here is kind of, you know, they're kind of taking the Singer-esque approach. And I wish they had some better. We can get a gallery here. Kind of better show. Swiss Commission. Oh, so these are their builds, Sport Edition. So let's take a look at one of these. Oh boy, pictures galore. Let me see if I can get you a better view there. So, you know, very traditional, simple design. I think that long hood, traditional, and good like application of you know, the like Fibonacci, you know, which is a design cue that kind of gives proportion where it needs to be and balances the design. And let me get through some of these pictures. But obviously, clean engine bay. These are like L24 and L28 motors, if I'm like stretching my memory. They're Weber carbs, things like that. But obviously, seems to be very true. But you know, to the roots of the car and things like that. But here you can see some cues that kind of take after the, you know, the Singer-esque way. Adjustable suspension there. Nice car, clean. It looks like, did I catch some carbon towers? No. Thought that was some carbon reinforced towers, but they're just kind of doing some interior type of cues. Look like a more modern, obviously, brake package. Watanabe wheels, which the Watanabe wheels, these aren't Watanabes. These are kind of very inspired by Watanabes, but the original rendering of a 240 came with Watanabe wheels. And the start button. I can tell you right now, I'm not a fan of the photographer. I think that people try to get this intimate bit of photography, but they almost go too intimate. And I'm like, well, I can't see and take in. And I wanted to do a show on photography, car photography fails or something, because I have tons of examples of, people that just don't kind of understand basic concepts of photography and things like that, which I've studied quite a bit. But cool car. I don't think it's the best example of what I was trying to get at here. But basically to just say that, this is another car that's receiving the Singer-esque treatment. Obviously they have a wide body, which, I won't say that this company is blowing my hair back, but 100 grand European here, which, euros, which translate to what, 125, 120, 130, something like that US, depending on the conditions. So, obviously they're in business. Obviously a website doesn't mean anything, but they do have quite a few builds here, so somebody's paying it. So another interesting one, if you're an off-road fan, is FJ's, the FJ company here, which they do a lot of different types of Landcruisers, and they actually have a lot of builds. I was really surprised. They are moving these things, and they are not cheap. So this was a big one. This was one of the first Toyotas to breach that $100,000 mark at Barrett-Jackson, and it's just going to have a bulletproof following, and this is definitely going to be it. But these are, they go all in with these. They put ABS systems in them, traction control, and I mean, you can see right here, I mean, they're not for the poor, that's for sure. So there's another brand that, and I think the 70s eras, or even the late 60s Broncos, there's a company that builds those. But definitely a nice looking vehicle for people that want something different. I think for people that live in very smog, regulated type of territories, anything about, usually, I don't know, 1975, 1980 or older, you get a big break on smog and things like that. But definitely, I was surprised when I came onto this website. Where are the featured builds? They just had tons and tons of different options, and they've done, obviously, an incredible amount of builds. So even did a little bit newer version, but pretty sick. So continuing on, another one that I think moving forward that we're going to see are these Mercedes. And so I start to think, the 70s, we see some Japanese brands were trying to break into the U.S. market. And there's definitely some keys with Japanese, and Lil Unk, you bring up the old Eagle. That's definitely has a movement behind it, that old Eagle 4-wheel drive. But when you think about the 70s, I think it's it's Japanese, it's Italian. I don't know. I've questioned if the 70s boats, like the big long Cadillacs and Caprices and things, will these these skateboards like you're seeing being developed by Rivian and things like that, if truly that's going to be fully self-contained like they're implying, will we see maybe some of those types of cars being thrown on one of those? Because their chassis are garbage, and I mean they're body on frame, a lot of them. They're not very stiff, not very good to build. I think it's why most people aren't really messing with them yet. Obviously some genre, anything that's cheap, and that's the key with the Restomods, and that's the key with a lot of these, is they try to typically start with something, a chassis that's obtainable, and then turn it into something that is, it gives you a value, delta. I guess delta would be the word, to where you can buy it cheap, invest, a reasonable amount of money in development and labor, but then ask a price that kind of fits into the market space and with what people who would be a fan of that type of brand would be willing to pay. And I think Corvette has that opportunity on certain chassis. I've got digital renderings and some things that I've worked on, kind of tried to get some investors on that deal, but didn't get there due to timing. But interestingly, the 190, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mercedes 190e, but this car was continually developed for DTM racing in the late, I guess, the middle 80s. And this is kind of what made the E30 M3 so iconic. That car was also built as a homologation to race, and this was the competitor to that car, which was the 190E. But interestingly, as you can see, you could buy a lot of these Mercedes 190s, which were just like 4-cylinder automatics, things like that. You can get that body. You can't get the more aggressive like Evo 2 version, but they ended up taking this body and putting it on this C63 AMG. And I've seen some of these body swaps. B is for Build, who has had a number of cars at SEMA. He's doing a build right now of putting like a 69 fastback Mustang body on like a 2015 Mustang, and so it presents some challenges in terms of height because the cars have gotten taller. But this company actually did a really aggressive jig configuration here to take this body off and jigged it aggressively, but they actually embedded a roll cage in the pillars. You can't see it, and that's how they ended up kind of getting this car. And you can see it a little bit right here. You can see that this roll cage is kind of buried in there. It's tough work, believe me, tough work. But they ended up getting it in there and getting it on a modern chassis, modern brakes, supercharged engine, things like that. So, and made it kind of so these are the types of things that I think 80s Mercedes, 80s BMWs. Some of these cars I think could be opened up to this Singer type of treatment. But $150,000 Civic. Yeah, it's happening. It's happening. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now. I mean, and there it is. So I know you might be blown away. I know you might be like, well, I mean, he said 150. I wasn't sure, but now that you showed it to me, I mean, let me check my account. But yes, this is the $150,000 Civic. And so here's the deal. I think people need to understand is like, in Japan, there are definitely major fans of the Honda brand. And we may not relate here or in Europe necessarily, but there are definitely hardcore guys that have made money that would probably be open to this, and I'll tell you why. It's because this build is going to be done by what's called the legends of the development of a lot of Honda products and things like that. And they're going to do a series of builds, and this is just one of them. They're going to do a GTR also, but I'm going to just show you the impressive thing, because the thing that gets me, I was a fabricator of headers and things like that. So when I see something good, I mean, I see something good, and I was like, that's good. So look, you can hate on Civics or anything, but you can't hate on that header. That is some titanium magic right there. So I just got to get in there so you can see it. I mean, this is a piece of just beauteous artwork. I used to build just exactly like this, and I can tell you that, I would spend 8-10 hours just, shaving stainless and stuff like that to get these types of pieces to work just like you see here, which these are actually pie cuts. Titanium, essentially you're pie cutting less than 10 degrees is what you would want for no flow restriction or anything like that. You don't want to, obviously, this is equal length, but I remember doing the work, tacking it together, and just looking at it, and it's just because while you're doing it, it's horrible labor, but you're also just so impressed with it as you build it, and to see it done. I mean, but this is very clean, and the thing that I loved about Hondas in that time is just the engine bays kind of give you a great opportunity. Very basic valve cover. You can do a lot with that. I think the shape of it design wise is very nice, and the titanium here is just amazing. But essentially these are the guys from Spoon. The guy who founded Spoon was a race driver for Honda, and he ended up opening his company. They raced a lot in endurance series, so they would build various Civics, Accords, things like that to race in these long endurance, like 24 hours of Nürburgring, and a lot of series within Japan. So these cars are going to be built by the masters. Now let me point out something to you may have missed, and like I said, this applies to any car, so you might not like Hondas, but look, you can apply a lot of what you're seeing here to anything. And so these strut towers here, you can notice that they're black, and the reason that they are black like that is they got a company called Opera Performance. to do carbon laminates over these. So the idea is to strengthen these metal pieces that typically take a lot of the loads out of the struts and things like that. And so they reinforce them with carbon, basically overlaying a pre-preg carbon, vacuum bagging them, and making it an additional structural component just to keep the car super lightweight. And they actually did that with the entire floor of the car inside. So it's going to be all carbon in there. Carbon strut towers, titanium. So it's all about dropping the weight of this car down to almost 2,000 pounds, at which time they'll couple it with an engine that makes about 220 horsepower. The idea is purity, simplicity, lightweight, all the things that their brand has always worked on. So I wouldn't pay 150 because I'll build that baby, but but somebody will. There's no question. Somebody that has made money and has, built their company or whatever, they say, look, I got more money than I have time, take my money. So we'll see who it goes to. I'm curious. I'm curious, but obviously Spoon is a pretty big brand. This is their typical livery, and this is the typical presentation that they have. But there's also a company, and this is what led me to believe the GTRs, R32s through R34s, I think are going to be a huge candidate for the Singer treatment, especially as these cars get to import age, which they are. R32s have been there, R33s are coming. There might be a little bit of complication with importing R33s, but that has to do with some crazy deal that happened with a company called MotorX. But as you can see here, they have a body in white, which it's not an original body in white, but they probably put it back to one. Maybe it is. Bodies in white, just to let you know if you're not familiar with a body in white, manufacturers like Honda, Ford, whoever, in production of cars that they believe are going to be raced in club racing and things like that, some companies will offer what's called body in white, and they basically will deliver a car. They won't build it into a full, complete car, at which point the race team has to buy it and then take it all back apart. They'll give them a body in white, very basic, and then they can buy components usually through the parts desk. Interestingly, Corvette did this with the C5, and you could actually buy some C5 FRCs through the GM parts desk. You didn't go through the typical production channels through the dealership. You went to the parts desk, and it was called a box car, as a lot of people call them. They are out there, to where the car was basically delivered in pieces, and people built dedicated race cars with them. I think it's very low numbers, 20. There might be 20 C5s out there that were box cars. So this may be an original body in white. It's quite possible there were companies in Japan, and this is Mines. This is a company called Mines, which was made very popular through the game Gran Turismo, but they may have an original body in white, who knows. But they're going to do a full chassis prep here, and typically what they do there is unibodies are multiple metal panels that are all kind of put together and tack welded in different places. Well, even though they're all tack welded in all these places, if you twist and rake on those cars, you'll still get movement in between those tack welds. So what you can typically do with a chassis prep is you can stitch weld them, and you can stitch weld like a 1-inch weld and actually add a lot to that structure, and you can add a ton of rigidity to a unibody car, and that's how you take something to the next level. And obviously you can take out weight strategically and reinforce at different places. So that's what they're going to do here, and obviously you see all new components. These cars were very fast, no question about it. And the Mines, variants of GTRs. So I definitely think that when we see GTRs over here, I can see an opportunity to kind of bring that interior up, because they were still just Nissans. To us here in this country, certain movies made these cars really appealing, but they were still Nissans over there. And while they were a nice upper end, they were much like Challengers here, to where they had one for 30 grand, and like they have a Challenger for 25, 30 grand, they have one for 90 grand. So GTRs are much like that. They were very basic family cars, but they also had the GTR variants. So I think that a company that could take the interior to the next level, inject a lot of motorsport flavor, obviously the RB26 build that, incorporate that. So I could see easily making a $300,000, $400,000 GTR, especially if you're talking about an R34 or 33. So definitely possible. Interestingly, Mustangs, I'm surprised, haven't become more popular, but this company is in the UK. They're doing these Mustangs, kind of a similar treatment. GT500, obviously, I was pretty intrigued by this. I love individual throttle bodies, just so you know. I mean, it's just fantastic. Obviously, this is fuel injected. These are not carburetors. Some people confuse that. You can see the fuel injectors here. These are just, individual downdraft throttle bodies. The idea of throttle bodies versus a plenum, just for people that may not be aware, when you combine a plenum and have a centralized throttle body, the issue is that each cylinder breathes differently. And so when each cylinder breathes differently, it varies how much volumetric efficiency there is in terms of each cylinder getting its own air. So when you go to individual throttle bodies like that, you're basically allowing each individual cylinder to breathe equal air on its own. And so when you combine that with, like we looked at in the Civic earlier, with that equal length header, you allow each one to breathe in equally and allow each one to breathe out equally. So that's really, when you look at an 8-cylinder or a 4-cylinder motor, what you really should be thinking is it's 4 individual engines. So in a 4-cylinder, or in an 8-cylinder, it's 8 individual engines. The more that you can make each engine perform the same as a unit, they will make more power collectively. So you making them breathe on their own, get their own spark, and that's where you get coil on plug and everything like that. So that's when you really get into developing naturally aspirated engines and making power. And Gixxer Joe there, I mean, obviously by the name, he's a little familiar with that, because obviously when you get into street bikes and Gixxers, CBRs and things, you will see a lot more of this technology, because they're always trying to squeeze every little last bit naturally aspirated out of a motor, and that's what makes bikes pretty damn cool. But came across this thing. This was a viewer sent me this, a friend of mine, and he was just intrigued by this, and I was like, what do we have here? Interestingly, this was engineering students. They did a Porsche Boxter into shooting brake of our dreams. I'm not sure it's of my dreams, but I will say that, and I can't do this with my hand. I wish I could, like from this much forward, I'm like, okay, cool. It gets a little interesting, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm not a huge fan from the back. I think I was a little disappointed. It looks a little wee goofy. But, compared to the fact that you're coming from that, which is a very ugly car, that first gen Boxster, when they shared with the 996 with the fried egg headlights, boy, I mean, Porsche guys revolted. So I think this is a big car right here for somebody to figure out what to do with it, because they're going to be cheap. Same with 996 Porsches, very cheap. So I think there's a big opportunity there for those types of cars. But the back, I can't say I'm a huge fan. Anybody see that? That I think it's the line below. They wanted to integrate the 99-watt tail lights, but I think the hatch design, it just there's a lot of conflict going on there from the design perspective. I just don't think it works. But it's interesting, and I mean a heck of a lot of wrench time in there. And students that did it, so like that angle's not so bad. I get a little bit more Panamera off of it, but obviously they have a video, and this was on the drive. You can check that out. But these guys, they look pretty pumped up, and I mean, students. I mean, who can't appreciate that? Guys out there doing work and trying to get it done. Interesting though. What do you guys think about shooting brakes? A lot of people don't understand the idea of the shooting brake, and it's definitely more of a European flavor. They love hatches. They love all that kind of stuff. And, oh boy, I just lost. So the question is, I just lost the screen. I don't know if I'm still live. I just lost. Okay. So I'm still. Sorry about that, guys. So I lost the screen here, and it is my typical screen that I use to monitor my live stream, and it just gave me the aw snap from Chrome. So maybe that's just a signal for me to be quiet. So I can't see. Let's see, the color makes it pop at least. I mean, the color is definitely. I actually had considered doing this color on my Corvette. I've wrapped my Z06 a number of times. I obviously have the yellow calipers. I got powder coated by a guy in Atlanta, and black wheels, and I mean, it's just a natural fit with this color. But it looks good. I mean, in terms of the color, but I don't know. I'm gonna reload this and see what happens. I hope it doesn't interrupt the stream there, but we will see, because we're in uncharted territory here when Chrome crashes while I'm live. So, poor car looks like a messed up fish from the back. Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's that view right there. It's just it's rough. It's rough. I just can't get into it. I think if they would have eliminated this line or widened this hatch, I'm just not sure. Maybe brought the lights in. I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. I don't know. But that's that, guys. So let's see. In terms of, I want to get back to, somebody asked a question, and let me go back up here. Is what cars from our generations, 90s, early 2000s, do you see going up in price? Crazy. Oh boy. So believe me, the question that plagued me in the span of life. So I definitely, the downturn was an interesting period, because it's like hindsight seems so clear today when we look at Porsches and we look at certain cars that have just skyrocketed in value. And obviously, like, you look at guys like Magnus Walker. Let me find something interesting here. Magnus Walker, who was buying air-cooled Porsches cheap when people didn't even want them. And like the 944 Porsche, I'd looked at those for years. They're going up in value. And so I definitely tried to get into a predictive state of mind. And I do have a few that I think will go up in value. The question is, like, will they go up tremendously in value? Will we see the Porsche effect? Porsche as a brand, I think, is just on the rise in terms of appeal and things like that. And Porsche has definitely continually evolved themselves. So the question becomes, what are the other cars out there? And I'm going to tell you, just the best way for me to get into this is, like, I've talked to people. You'll see guys, and I'll use the example of, like, guys that have C4 Corvettes or C3s or something like that, because I'm just familiar with that group. They'll say, look, I have a 1985 C4 and the color is bronze and two-tone with brown, and it's an automatic, but I looked it up, and it was one of six that got this brown color and this white interior. And well, I mean, it's one of six for a reason. Like, who was going to order that? So it's like, the perception is rarity equals value. That's my point. A lot of people believe rarity equals value, and that's not true. Rarity can also mean nobody wants it. And so you have to combine these couple of factors. And there's a few factors that I've seen over the years that have definitely affected future value, and there's a reason why people miss it, because there are some things we can't predict. Regulation is one of them. When future regulations go into place, it then makes certain cars appealing because they become deregulated. They become something that you'll never see again. And flip-up headlights are a great example of that. Flip-up headlights went away because, obviously pedestrian crash standards and things like that. So now there's just this fan base for anything with a pop-up headlight. Immediately got one drop in that bucket of future collectability. It didn't guarantee it, but now you've got all these vehicles that pop-up headlights. Now everybody's like, well, let's think about this, and what car becomes more appealing. You see Miatas. NA1 first gen Miata is more appealing than NA2s, even though NA2s are obviously a little bit kind of funky looking. People like the pop-up headlight, and so you're seeing that in Mazda. You're seeing a little bit of that with Corvette. So it's production obviously plays into it. Production numbers play into it, and then regulation plays into it. And then, it also, the brand itself plays into it. And obviously we saw the Pontiac's gone now. Who would have seen that? Suddenly a ton of Trans Ams just skyrocketed in value. So, I try to look at all these different parameters, and I try to think of what's trending and what do people want to buy. And so there's a few Japanese vehicles I've thought, like first gen 4Runners. I think they're continually, you can have a vehicle that's had tremendous amount of production numbers, like massive, and still become very collectible, because some vehicles are made so much that people just don't care about them. They buy them, abuse them, wreck them. And so like a Mark IV Supra is a perfect example. Everybody modded those cars. They were buying them, and there was just a time when you could buy them fairly cheap and people just modded the piss out of them. Now, if you have a stock one, I mean, it's worth $100,000 or more. So, who knew? They weren't mega rare. They weren't, 300 horsepower from the factory and the time that they came out. It didn't put any, mark on them that they were going to be these mega valuable vehicles. But the movie, we didn't know the movie was going to come out. I call it the movie. Fast and the Furious changed all kinds of things. Paul Walker died. It adds value. So it's like there's a lot of these things that add value to certain cars that you just are never going to know. And so I try to look at, Corvette, just for an example, the C8 is, everything's changing. So now all of a sudden it's going to put into perspective what vehicles of the old style Corvette, but that we're theoretically never going to see again, front engine, rear drive, what of those cars is going to become, big time. And then if everything's going to be turboed, if everything's going to be automatic, so now theoretically manuals are going to go up in desire. Natural aspiration. So I start to get to, in Corvette land, I start to get to just C5 and C6 Z06, specifically 2004 Z06, the anniversary edition with the carbon hood, the C6 Z07 package, the carbon edition. I see that one. I think E46 M3 has potential. That was the manual gearbox, good chassis, had that kind of the motor that we didn't get with E36, we got in E46. So I think potentially there, but sometimes it's the car under the top one. And so I think potentially 330 Ci ZHP E46 maybe, instead of the 535, the 5 Series M, like in the the E34, I'm trying to think. There's a 540i that's actually more rare than the M5. So, it's just hard to say. I think that from our generation, third-gen Camaros are going up in value because people just didn't care about them. They just scrapped them, threw in them scrap yards. So, I mean, I've seen some pretty sick builds out of those, and all it takes is somebody to do something like Singer to a third-gen Camaro, and you get a few really monstrous third-gen Camaros on the internet, and all of a sudden people were like, well, I think I'm going to go buy one. And that's how, the trend wave begins. That's definitely what happened with Porsche. I mean, all of a sudden, it was just everybody wanted one. And Magnus Walker had a lot to do with that because, he just became kind of an internet hero. And, he's come kind of gone. But, the internet has a huge impact on what becomes collectible at this point. 540i Sport Manual. Yeah, that's the one. So it's definitely, who knows? And, obviously the E39 M5 we've seen going up in value. I think that in BMW, the M cars, it's just kind of a natural. If you see the E30 M3 going up, then I think you have to look at all M cars and just to a point. So we'll just see. I think the interesting, like E92, I think M3, the V8, with a manual, I think that's an interesting one. The 1 Series, you have to consider the 1 Series in the M's. I think they're immediately going to become collectible because to a degree, but not not $100,000 collectible, but just desired. I mean, you see the old shooting brake like Z3, so. Corvette wise, I mean, I gotta tell you, I never thought that I'd see a ZR1, like a C4 ZR1 with an LT5 for like 10 grand. I mean, but they're out there. But yeah, as far as Ford, I mean, Mustangs, it's anybody's guess. Fox bodies are obviously going up in value. So that makes me think that third gen Camaros and very certain Trans Ams. I mean, obviously you have, Grand Nationals. You have certain cars in there that no doubt I think are just on the rise and just going to be desired. Certain weird boxy stuff though, who knows what people are going to want to see. As things get round and plastic and all that stuff, people want to see boxy, square, and and just feel unique driving down the road in that. So yeah, we'll see. But I'd have to think about it. Maybe we'll have a show on it. Maybe I'll put some mind to it and try to think. But I mean, we had a cool car, man. Like I've had some BMWs for sure. Lace had a 535. It's so weird. I'm in the middle of the show. I have such organized archives, but when I have to pull them up like quickly while I'm talking, all of a sudden I'm like, where are they? where is all my pictures? What year? So, yeah, obviously this was Lace's 330. Ended up wrapping it, and did some different things. There's Lace driving down the road, but definitely I like Beamers. I like 3 Series. I can't deny that. I think they're great drivers' cars. And there's just certain ones that I think that they, much like Porsche, they part share. Anything that part shares well, I think just has a real big potential for people to want to mix and match the best of the gens. And I think of a lot of things like that, and you can see that happen with BMW. You can see it happen in certain Corvettes. You can WS6 and stuff like that. And especially as years pass, there's certain cars that I think are just going to be forgotten, and people are just not really going to pay much attention until they do. I think the FC RX-7, the FC variant, it was like the FD had all the attention. Oh, I don't know why my phone doesn't understand me. It ain't supposed to be listening. But yeah, the FC RX-7, Petrolicious just did a video on that. I've seen a number of them. The first gen RX-7s, I think that's a big one. So, it's just, I think it really, a big part of it depends on the economy. It depends on the Dow. Honestly, it's just like that parallel. As the Dow goes up, it's just an overall indicator. As people just start to have flexibility in what they spend, people will just start building what they loved. And I think there's some people loved American stuff, some people love Japanese. And so, and especially as the 70s and 80s came, where Japan and Germany were fighting for market share, they brought some stuff over here that's pretty interesting. And so, one big one is like, check this thing out. Just out of nowhere, I threw that at you. But so, old Mercedes, I think they're gonna be, definitely. I'm surprised there's not more of it going on already. This was one that I predicted that in my mind that was coming when the E30 M3 and all that stuff came. I think that there were, in my mind, I was like, look, there's a lot of cool looking Mercedes that, like, if you swap these things, not a great interior. I think they need, like, they tried to do a carbon with some stitching and stuff like that. A little bit fail there, but this car is like next level, and you don't have to love all of it to just recognize. There's some next level stuff going on, and I'm going to point out some things. But then they got a handbrake in it. You're like, as if you're not shocked enough, this dude throw a handbrake in here. so I'm like, man, But here's what I love about this thing, and I tell you all the time: forced induction systems will catch my eye every time, and this was an idea I had, and I finally have seen it. I have not seen it implemented. I still would do it differently, I'll tell you that right now. But I had an idea of doing a twin turbo LS Cadillac with a guy, and he wanted to do. He had talked about a 64 or 63 Series 62 Cadillac, or like a 70 Coupe de Ville, if I recall. I wanted to do the full grill out of an intercooler core and twin turbo it and split the cores in half and basically recreate the entire Cadillac grill with a polished intercooler. So that's what this guy, actually, whoever built this, did with this deal. This is a twin turbo. You can see twin wastegate dumps, if everybody understands what wastegate is on here. Wastegate basically is just it's the way that you stabilize the turbine speed. So basically the turbo will spin faster and faster, make more and more boost, and you want to level it off. The way you do that is you open a bypass. It's called a wastegate, and out comes the exhaust and theoretically stabilizes that wheel speed. So that's how you get up to a boost level and stay there. So big thing is to put them out the hood. That's probably the one thing I'm not like a huge fan of, but visually I think people, it's hypey. People want to see it, but that's the cool thing. But yes, come on. It's on bags. The thing's crazy looking. You don't have to love it to appreciate it. I think that's where I get with a lot of different things. And Eurowise, that's the company I believe that ended up having that car. But then that got me stumbling onto these, which were the 450 SLCs. These were super popular in New Orleans when I as a kid, and we had a lot of people from Miami over into New Orleans. It was kind of like LA and Vegas. They they share people quite frequently in New Orleans and Miami, New Orleans, Fort Lauderdale, all that stuff, Jacksonville, and people just loved their Mercedes in the 80s when I was growing up there. But barbecue and beers. All right, peace out, man. Appreciate you watching, as always. Be again tomorrow, Friday. So, but yeah, this car is pretty nice. You know, done well. Japanese plate, as you'll notice, though. So I think that car is in Japan. But, you know, and obviously these, like I talked about, the Evolutions, the Evo 2 with the Cosworth and all that stuff. So, yeah, that's about it, folks. I went through a lot there. We went over an hour. I don't know how I feel about the long shows in terms of people viewing afterwards. I'm looking at all these different metrics and parameters, trying to figure out what I'm doing. So obviously you have the live comment section here, but I super appreciate if you throw a like on the actual video and leave a comment in the comment section of the video. That definitely helps it promote it and whatnot. But, you know, we try to do something different every day, you know, just the kind of car stuff I look at. If you guys see anything cool, anybody viewing, tag me on Instagram. You can follow me down in the description there, and tag me and stuff. Email me if you want. I have my email down there, so I can throw it on the show. And, you know, like I said, throw a comment down below, actually, and let me know maybe a subject you want to talk about, and that's what we'll do in the future. So at this point, I'm going to take a drink, and I'm going to head out and go do something else in my quarantine time. So that's about it, guys. I appreciate everybody watching and everybody who keeps coming back. I'll catch you on the next one. You're watching Night Drive Live. See you next time.